Okay. So, hey, everybody, this is Barry Kleiman on a Playground Principles podcast with my oldest new friend. And I don't mean old by age, I just mean old friend because somehow Jack Fertig and I, were destined to meet. And it's true. We met online, but I had read a copy of his first book. I'm going to ask you to talk to me about your book, Life is a Joke, Jack.
Uh,
And we tripped over something online together, and then all of a sudden we realized we had all these different things in common. In fact, Mike, earlier today, I spoke with my brother, who was the mutual friend of your old friend Mike from Uppsala.
oh yeah, and Mike
You know,
Inselman, yeah.
and I just spoke to my brother this morning, told him I was going to meet with you. So anyway, because the book I wrote, The Playground Principles, is very much about connection. I love having this particular conversation because, again, Jack has been around the game far longer than I have, and, certainly professionally. Are you older? I don't remember. Anyway, we're both
Oh
old.
yeah, I'm old. I'm older than dirt.
Yeah, but in any case, his uh, his journey through the game of basketball is a lot about connection, and I was very excited to have this chance to speak with him about it. I know I haven't read all the jokes in his book, but I get to some of them, and most of them make me smile. I can't lie. I mean, he's a funny man. Not in the Joe Pesci when you say funny spirit, but I wanted to kind of get him on here and talk about really, and I was flattered. Mike did read the book, The Playground Principles,
Oh,
and he agreed maybe in some part to come on this podcast, not necessarily to talk about it, but maybe in some part because of what he read, because we really didn't know one another until we now do. And so I'm honored to have him here. So, Mike, why don't you tell me about you and your journey and go as far back as you like, because I think if anyone's going to listen to this, they could use as much Jack Furtick context as possible.
I don't know if you have enough time. I went to after graduating college. You talk about connections. It was 1970, and the Vietnam War was raging. I was a math major, but couldn't apply it, so I knew I was going to be a teacher. And every guy in my class was applying for teaching jobs.
Yep.
Uh, my high school football coach, who was also the athletic director, called me and he said, "We have a math opening, and the head of the math department would love to have you back. Why don't you come back here? We have openings in football, basketball, and baseball, which is what I played." He said, "I would suggest you only do two of them," which to him meant football and something else. So I did football and basketball, and the baseball coach, when I saw him, told me he was disappointed. Thought I could have been a baseball coach, but that's another story. Uh, 2 years at my high school, same high school I went to, and I was the only single coach of all the sports. And
What?
all those guys said, what I would do if I were you is be a graduate assistant. You don't have to teach. All you have to do is you get to coach and recruit and get to the college level. So I wrote over 300 letters trying to be a graduate assistant, and then I was going to decide where I was going to live. I got one positive reply, and it was at the University of Vermont, and that guy got fired. But he did pass along the information to the next coach, who at the end of June, I had already signed my contract to teach the third year. And the problem with that is when you start your first day, your third year, you get tenure. And tenure is, all these people would say, "Oh, I got a job for life. I just have to make sure I don't do anything immoral," and oh, that what security. I didn't want that. There was a guy who didn't teach me, but he taught my mother, who was there while I was teaching. I said, I don't want, 30 years from now to say, "Oh, yeah, Barry, I remember you, your uncle." I didn't want that. So I ended up going to the University of Vermont. I was the only assistant on the staff. There was the head coach who was making 12,500, and I was making 1,000 for the year. So we had 13,500 tied up in salaries. You can imagine, how good a job that was. After the year, the head coach said, "You've really been working hard. I'm trying to get you a job, but it's so hard. I can upgrade you as a graduate assistant. I know this guy, George Raveling, who just got the job at Washington State. Well, I went out to Washington State. George tried to talk me out of it. He said, look, it only pays $1,550 for the year. I said, George, I'm only making 1,000 now.
It's a big raise.
That's a big raise, come on. So I went out there. I was there for 2 years. And Oregon at that time, the players were called the kamikaze kids because they dove on the floor. They played so hard. And back then, you couldn't have your own players work camp, your summer camp, but you could have other players in the league. And we always had Oregon guys come up. And other than Ronnie Lee, who was the best athlete I ever coached, every other guy was maybe, they weren't even rotation guys. They were ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th guys. And a lot of the high school coaches would kid them about, oh, you guys, you're old, you old time, you dive on the floor, play that crazy stuff. You want to keep the game in the 40s because there was no shot clock back then. And these guys would get in their face. And I said, the key to coaching is to get your team to believe in what you believe in as strongly as you believe in it.
Yep.
Because if that happens, you're going to win. And that's exactly what happened to us. And I got to go down there. I went to the University of Oregon. They paid nothing. I had to get jobs, painting apartments, a sporting goods store, lumber yard. That lasted a week, and then we got fired, the other graduate assistant and I. And then I finally got my first full-time job, which was at Robert Morris College in now Robert Morris University in Pittsburgh. I was there for a year. And one of the assistants at Washington State, Steve Cottrell, left the same year I left Washington State because he and Sonny Allen were such good friends. And Sonny got the SMU job. He said, Steve, I need you here. And Steve went down there. But when he left, he said to me, I don't care where you at. I'm going to call you when I get a head coaching job. And he got the head coaching job at Western Carolina. And at that time, well, we'll leave that part out. I went with him to Western Carolina. The team was on probation from the prior staff. And if you ever heard the violations, you would know how screwed up the NCAA was. Like when Tark said, they're so mad at Kentucky, they put Cleveland State on 2 more years probation. That's what this was like. But it's another story for another time.
Yes, sir.
Pretty good one, too. So after 3 years, we had done real well. I ended up going to the University of Tennessee. I was there for 7 years. At the end of the 7th year, I was getting married, and there's something else that factored into it. But I knew I wanted to start a family. I was almost 39, a month away from 39. I wanted to start a family, and I didn't want to be on the road all the time. I wanted to be around. So I talked to a friend of mine who got the job at Toledo. And I said, what do you think? He said, why don't I do this? I'll make you associate head coach, but you'll be the part-time coach so you don't have to go on the road recruiting. So that worked. I went there. I was there for, 4 years? I think 4 years. And then George Raveling had always called me. When I got to Tennessee, called me and said, you want to come up here to Washington State to be a full-time assistant? My guy just left. I said, George, I bounced around. I don't want that reputation, 1 year here, 2 years here, 1 year here. And so I don't want to do it. He calls me back and he says, my other assistant left. I know what you said, but now there's a $10,000 raise involved. I said, Joe, I can't do it. Then he went to Iowa and he called me and asked me to go to Iowa with him. But we were doing pretty well at Tennessee. And once again, I didn't want to keep bouncing around. So I said, no. Well, Toledo, the staff gets fired, or the head coach gets fired, which means the staff does too. And coincidentally, one of his assistants at USC left to get a head coaching job. And I called him and I said, George, is that invitation still open? And he goes, yeah, sure, come on out. 2 weeks later, after I'm at SC, George yells out to the secretary, hey, Jerry, call 3 of the people who applied for the job and tell them we hired Jack. So if anybody asks, we can say we interviewed 4 guys. That's how you get jobs. Like you said, connections. I get that job because I said, George, we got fired at Toledo. you have an opening. Can I come out? And he said, sure, come on. That's connections.
Yes, sir.
He gets into a car accident. A lot of people, I don't know if people notice or not. He got into a car accident, almost died. He was on life support for a while. He was in really bad shape.
Where was
And we,
this,
we,
Jack?
we didn't let it out at USC.
Mhm.
He was driving, he was on his way to work, and his older retired professor T-boned him.
Mm.
And you know those steel gates that they have in front of houses? He had a big Lexus SUV that went through the steel gate. And he said, I just remember laying there in the driver's seat, and this homeless guy came up and said, brother, you okay? And he went, no, I don't think I am.
Right.
And so that was that. Jerry Tarkanian had been doing the color commentary for USC my last 2 years there. I was there 4 years. And he said to me, hey, I know SC's great, but I know you went there for George and you're leaving. And I said, yeah, I came for George. And
George had left at that point, Jack?
George retired.
Okay.
So the accident caused him to retire. So he had the press conference. And, you've seen George, kind of a robust guy. He came to the press conference after getting out of the hospital for probably a month, maybe a month and a half. And your listeners may not know, but I know you will. He looked like Roy Campanella,
Mm.
coming out emaciated in a walker.
Mm.
His hair had turned gray because he couldn't color it. It looked off. So Tark said, look, I'm getting a Fresno State job. Do you want to come to Fresno? So I said, yeah, sounds great. My wife came home and said, my job, believe it or not, is terminated and it's being moved to Fresno.
Oh, shush.
So, yeah, so it was an easy decision. I was there for 7 years, and then Jerry retired, and I was thinking about where am I going to go now? And most of the moves I made, I didn't have any kids. Almost all of them, as a matter of fact. My older son was president of seventh grade, not because of his platform. He's just a popular kid. And the other one had just finished second grade. And the seventh grader said, do we have to move? I got all these friends here. So I said, no. And I took a high school job and also was the host of Jerry Tarkanian's radio show for another 7 years. So I took the high school job right before I'm ready to start. I signed the contract in April. I'm working the guys out in May, which you could do in high school that you can't do in college. I was working the guys out. I wasn't even supposed to start teaching until August. And I sit down at a computer. I feel something. I had emergency surgery at T1011 and I actually went to teacher orientation with a cane, which wasn't the best look for a new teacher. In any case, I taught math, which is what I taught in high school
Right.
back in New Jersey. So it was full circle. And after 3 years, the people at Stanford pain medicine, I was on a morphine pump. I had a spinal cord stimulator that didn't work. I've had 17 back surgeries. And people at Stanford said, look, you're killing yourself. Why don't you give up coaching? So I gave up coaching and taught another 7 years and then retired because our younger son was a pretty good basketball player, was ready to play for Rick Majerus.
Oh,
We
wow.
went on a visit to St. Louis U, and Rick wasn't there because they had admitted him to the hospital, and a couple months later he died. So, that was kind of a bummer
Yep.
for Alex. So he plays in an open gym, and this coach called. I'm from Cal State Monterey Bay, Division II school. You want to come and visit? And Alex, hey, Monterey, that sounds like a nice place.
Yep.
Yeah. So he went there. He's the leading scorer in the history of his high school. He's the leading scorer in the history of Cal State Monterey Bay. And then he went and played a year in Australia. But he met his wife at Monterey. When he came home, um, a friend of mine had him a job in Norway. Great job, 3,000 a month, apartment, car, food, everything, gas card. And he said, nah, this girl I was messing around with. And I said, as soon as you said girl, forget it. Billy Tubbs used to say, uh, let's just use, he used to use another word, but let's just say girls are undefeated.
Hmm.
That's what Billy used to say. And at least he ended up marrying this girl, and she's the mother of our only granddaughter. And our other son went to UC Irvine and was their video guy. And he left here in 2007, never came home. Went to Newport Beach, loved it. And if you've ever been there, you know why.
Yep.
And that's that. So there we are, present time. We retired, and I actually left the same time that my younger son did. Walked across the stage together, and that was it. Retired in 2012. Followed him for 4 years because every school in the league was in California. And now here we are. Here I am talking to you. So when you said I was your old friend, not in age, you were lying. All right.
Well, okay, but old friend in that,
Oh yeah, I understand.
yeah, in many ways.
But old is appropriate.
Well, fair, fair enough. So first of all, you couldn't leave Fresno because you had already lived in every other freaking city there was.
Pretty close. Yeah.
I mean, gosh darn. Um, Cal State Monterey Bay, what a beautiful place to go to school.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
my other son went to UC Irvine, which is really located in Newport Beach.
yeah,
So
yeah, but
we had two really nice places to visit.
Yeah, Cal State Monterey Bay. I'm 2 hours from there, and it's I'll be going down in a couple weeks to meet some friends, but it's a very
Oh,
special place. But that's incredibly awesome. I know, um, I know that what. So one of the things I always talk about, and you read the book, and we can talk about that in a
yeah,
minute, but or not. But one of the questions a really thematic question in the book in the playground principles is a question that seems like it's a basketball question, and it is, but it isn't. And the question, and it really kind of weaves throughout the book, and what I want to weave throughout all these podcasts is, you sat down, and if my notes are any good, you went from Vermont to Washington State to Oregon to Pittsburgh to West Carolina to Tennessee to Toledo to USC and to Fresno. If I missed one or two, whatever.
perfect. That's perfect. You did it.
But
It took longer.
yeah, of course, of course. But so the question is, and you touched on it a little bit, but what I always ask people, for starters, is, we have a finite amount of time in this life, right, Jack? And so I
Yeah,
think an important question for all of us, not to get too philosophical here, but it's important as we build out, because it comes to communication and connection and all these things, is, as you were doing all this, tell me what game you thought you were playing. It is a question in the book. It's a playground principle. When I
yeah,
showed up in the playground, I was a 5'9" kid who could jump a little bit, whatever. But the game I played there was building trust. People took me because they know I'd make good passes, and because I wasn't going to be a great scorer, as an adequate defender, but I did understand the game and how to share the ball, and I understood that, and that permeated into the rest of my life. This is not about me. You can read my book and hear about all that stuff. But what game were you playing when you decided you could not have to go to teach instead of going to fight, and then since then you have a shit, what is it, 35-year career on the road, um,
yeah.
and various parts. So how would you describe, even in retrospect, what game you were playing?
Well, I
You
would
understand my
say,
question?
yeah, I think so. When we had our 50th reunion, um, I went back, and one of the guys I went to school with was it worked with the government, and his team that he was with won the Nobel Peace Prize.
Wow.
And I remember saying to him, boy, congratulations, I can. He said, you had a more fun career than I did. And he said, let me tell you something. We knew you were going to be a coach at the age of 8,
Wow.
because I was doing more of that. Like, let's say, when we had that small town, very small town, Highland Park, New Jersey,
Yep.
there were 3 elementary schools. We didn't have a middle school back then. In 7th grade, all the other two came to our school.
Yep.
And then in 8th grade, two schools, us and one of the others, went to the third school. So when you get those kids together in the 7th grade, there's always, oh man, we're better than you. The people in the north side's better than the south side.
Right.
Are you kidding? I can. So I would be the guy to organize games. I would put guys in position. Let's say in football, I was the guy who put guys in position. You know, you're a running back, you're a center, you guys are guards, you're tackles, and here's what we're gonna do. And I remember one time I'm thinking about plays, and I said, well, we got this kid who's a good running back. And of course, I was the quarterback. And I said, I hand off to him. And everybody back then just played, and I'm 7-on-7, head to head, and an umbrella four defense. That's all anybody knew. So I'm thinking, well, this guard blocks this guy and right in front of him, and the tackle blocks the guy in front of him. And I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, you know what? It'd be easier if the tackle blocked the guy in front of the guard and the guard blocked the guy in front of the tackle. And then in ninth grade, I get my playbook and I see this play. And I said, hey, I invented that.
That's
I invented that 2 years ago. But that's what I did. I would get guys together. I'd say, let's play. I mean, I was a decent athlete, but I would get the guys and say, okay, we're going to play on Saturday morning at 10 down at Donaldson Park.
yeah,
You guys get here. People had their equipment. If they didn't, I tried to help them, and that, I guess, was the game I was playing, not knowing I was playing it. And
sure.
then once I got into coaching, my goal was to be a head coach at a Division I school. So I had an opportunity to go to a Division II school and turned it down. A guy who was a graduate assistant in football at Vermont, who I lived with, ended up getting a head football job at a Division III school. And he called me, said, you want to be the coach? I said, nah, thanks, Sween. But at 2 years later, he had moved to a Division II school. He said, I'm the only guy on the committee and I'm selecting the coach. You want to come here? Nah, I don't think so. Well, then one of the chancellors at Western Carolina got the president's job at Kennesaw State. And she called and said, hey, would you like to be our coach? No, you guys are Division II. She goes, we have 35,000 students. She was really pushing. But I said, no, I waited and waited. And I had interviewed at the Division I level and lost out on jobs for a variety of
Yeah,
reasons.
who knows, right? Yeah.
And but that in terms of the game I was playing, let's put it this way. When I was at USC, Larry Keating was the athletic director at Seton Hall. And he called George and he said, George, PJ Carlissimo just left. I need to hire a coach. First thing George said, how much are you paying? And he said 600,000. And George went, wow. And Larry said, is that wow high or wow low?
Yeah.
And he said, well, it's 2 times more than I'm making at SC.
Right.
So Larry said, well, do you want the job? So George pulled the assistants together and he said, what do you guys think of, it'd be starting over with a down program, whatever. And I remember being back at, I think it was the Nike, one of the Nike camps, either Nike camp or the Adidas camp. And this guy came up to me and he said, hey, you guys going to the hall? And I went, I don't know. That's up to George. He has to decide. He says, well, if you do, you'll get Tim Thomas,
Right.
who at the time
Sure.
was one of the two best high school players in the country. The other one being Kobe Bryant. Top two guys were Kobe Bryant, Tim Thomas. I said, really? Why do you say? Well, what was it? So-and-so is his coach and also his advisor and his cousin. And he loves Raveling. And he really wants to send them, he wants to stay close. But if you guys went to Seton Hall, you could get. I said, really? Why is he like George? Did he work at camp or something? He goes, no. George has me on his mailing list. George had 3 mailing lists of about 500 people, and I'm thinking, this guy, we're going to get one of the 2 best players in the country because the guy advising him is on George's mailing list.
Right.
So immediately I started my own mailing list. George taught me to read a book with a highlighter and then get the highlighted parts typed up. So they're like Cliff's Notes, right? But I called them Fertig Notes.
Yeah.
I
I've
sent
seen them.
I'm sure, yeah, because Ben was on the
Yep.
Ben was on the list, Ben Braun.
Yep.
And I sent him to other coaches, and I sent him to athletic directors, and of course I sent him to friends. And these guys, this list really became big. I sent it to Bob Hill, who was the coach of the Spurs prior to
Wow.
Popovich,
Yep.
and Bob Hill was doing a TV uh, uh, halftime gig with Doc Rivers. And Bob Hill, if you don't know, is the most organized guy you'll ever meet in your life. I mean, if you walk in his hotel room and you happen to bump the table and the book moves, he's going to move it back. He's really,
Yeah.
yeah, right. So he had two binders. One was, I think, motivation. One said coaching. And Doc said, "What are those things?" "Oh, a friend of mine, Jack Fertig, does these notes." Doc said, "You mind if I get them?" "No." So he takes one of them. He goes into the corner and he said, "Doc is just pouring through this." He comes back and he says, "You got to get me on this guy's mailing list." And that's how I got to know Doc Rivers.
That's awesome.
So yeah, when you're talking about, what game I was trying to be a head coach is what I really wanted to do. Everything I did probably was for that, except for the fact that I would never take time away from what I was supposed to be doing because, that's who's paying you.
That's right.
And George used to always say, some guys work harder trying to get their next job than on the one they have. And I always remembered that. And I felt like, well, it's, let's do what you got to do. And I came close a few times, but
Well, that's
never
at,
happened.
control the controllables, which you were which
That's
you were
that's right. That's
trying to
right.
do. So this might be the same question, and maybe not, but I talk a lot, and I'm sure again, you've been involved in this so long about, non-negotiables in our lives.
Right.
Lines which just we won't cross. Could they be called principles? Sure.
Yeah.
So whether it's a non-negotiable and I think you did read the playground principles. I think you told me that.
Right. Right.
Were,
Yep.
were there anything in there, and it doesn't have to be, I'm not looking for compliments or handouts or whatever. I'm really talking about the concept of principles, because that is where I think we've lost,
Right.
societally and all of those things. But were there any principles in there that resonated or that you would take umbrage with, surprise you, challenge your thinking, anything at all, anything in particular that resonated?
Well, I did take notes, wrote in the book as I was going, different things. And I wrote, those two books, Life's a Joke and Life's Still a Joke. But I always wanted to write a book on leadership. And the title was going to be The Absence of Role Model Leadership.
Love it.
So, right, I would go right along with your, playground principles. And as I told you, the problem with your book is not the principles part; it's the playground, because people don't use the playground anymore. But that be that as it may, the principles are what you're trying to get across,
Correct.
and those are the things that resonate. So, leadership. What I did, I read so many books. George would tell me about books on leadership, motivation, coaching, whatever, and self improvement, and I started to cut out quotes from different books, and I put them in categories. And it came to me one day, I just realized there are 5 categories of a leader, and every trait falls into one of those 5 categories, if not more than one.
Hmm.
And I think the categories I had were trustworthy, people skills, courage, vision, and passion. And when I read your book, that's what I kept, the fair cautious that you always have in there. The people know you wrote that during Passover?
No, but a good friend of mine who drew the cover art, who doesn't know if the ball is blown up or stuffed. I tell Jay he's the biggest waist of 6'5" I ever saw. But he also said it should be called the playground principles Haggadah. But if you're not Jewish, you won't understand those jokes. But that be
Right,
that
right.
as it may. But go back to that. What you're going to say about 4 questions.
Yeah, no, I mean the what you're saying makes so much sense that I don't know anybody, like you said, take umbrage. I don't know anybody who could argue what you're saying. They may not agree because of the way they live their life, but deep down, I can't see anybody arguing with what you have. And I think one of the two greatest books I ever read, not counting yours,
That's okay.
is Stephen Covey's
My
Seven Habits
favorite,
of
Jack.
Highly Effective People. Now it's right behind you, right?
I got two copies on my desk.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Right there.
it's my
Yep.
Bible.
Yeah. Right. And that's the same thing. I don't see how you can argue with any of those seven habits, especially, and this is what we don't have in today's society. I believe it's number five. Uh, try to what is it? I think first before you
Well, let's say we put first things
it's
first.
basically listen to somebody's point before you start
Oh
talking.
yeah, yes.
Seek first to
Seek first
understand,
to understand, then to be
then to
understood.
be understood. Right. Okay.
This
That's
is
that's I think the main one, because if you remember when we were kids, you had that, that where you have two people facing each other, each of them are holding the end of a rope, and they start swinging their hands, and you kind of, you jump in, but you have to time yourself, and you're kind of leaning, jumping, and leaning, and when it's ready to go in. That's how too many people have conversations today.
yep,
As you're talking, they're leaning, waiting to say something. Instead of, let's think about what this person said, and before we try to refute it, let's think about you know it, is it true, or am I going to deflect? And that's why I'm a non-political guy, because when I was growing up, you had football in the fall, and basketball in the winter, and baseball in the spring and summer,
yep,
until you had to start working out for football. And then after my freshman year, there was always a game, or there was always something you were preparing for.
yep.
So I never had time for politics. I never cared. I really cared about, what was going on.
Ditto.
So I'm not a political guy, but and I read that thing where politics comes from the Latin, poly meaning many and ticks meaning blood sucking creatures. So I never really, now I'm hearing things now that, and I'm right down the middle. All right. I'm not on either side,
Yep.
but I hear things now where, for example, they're talking about maybe the government's going to shut down. Well, the Democrats are saying you don't want to shut it down because, people are going to lose their insurance. Rates are going to go up. You're going to shut down hospitals. The other side never addresses that. They don't seek to understand. What they say, the Republicans say, is you're putting in uh, free insurance for illegals, and they're not talking about the same things. You got to address what the other person says. You have to understand what the other person is saying. I mean, and the Democrats are not saying, well, wait a second, that we're not defunding the police. We're not in favor of it, because the bill has so many things in it that there's some things that are good for both sides.
Yep.
But they don't talk about that. They'd rather talk about what they hate. And right now, people used to disagree with each other. Now they hate each other. I didn't mean to get political on
No,
you.
no. I mean, it's interesting and it's fine. I mean, I think it's hard to live in the world. Forget about just the United States. In the world on what is it? September 30th, 2025 at 2:46 p.m. Pacific, without it entering into our lives, because it's just so pervasive. And look, I have a motto: Fiorello LaGuardia. There's no Democratic or Republican way to clean the streets. I believe that 100%.
Yeah.
But it does take, to your point, a continuity of effort, people listening, people hearing the other side. You saw the four questions in the book. You joked about them. For anybody who didn't understand, I guess I didn't really know this until a little bit ago. Jack and I both are of Jewish heritage, and there's a Passover holiday which focuses around four questions. But in the book, the four questions are: what do you want to happen? Why do you want it to happen? What's the next thing you're going to step take to make it happen? And when will you take it? So if we applied that framework to all of these things that are going on, you and I had an online conversation about what went on, and I think Brad Greenberg, he posted something. The Ryder Cup was a pathetic display of human interaction. And if I walked up to one of those people who knocked the beer out of Rory McIlroy's wife's hand or whatever, what do you want to happen? What are you trying to, and I don't think people think about this enough. If
No,
you
they're just trying to get it out of their system.
if you
They're
did that in the
upset.
playground,
They've been waiting forever to get the Ryder Cup in New York. And you know how New Yorkers are, not the most patient people. They're all bad doctors, no patience. And they come out the first 2 days, and the US is just getting blasted. Well, people in New York are not going to sit back and say, well, congratulations to the Europeans. Let's see if the Americans can come back. No,
yeah,
they're just upset and they figure we're not doing very well. So I'm going to disrupt something. I'm going to knock the beer out of Rory McIlroy's wife's hand, or we're going to start a chant. It was supposed to be Scotty Scheffler, and it turned into Rory McIlroy with you shouldn't say it on a podcast, but let's just say it was a two-word phrase, and one was profane, the other was pronoun.
yeah. There you
And
go.
and that's what are we doing? But I don't think that would have happened. I don't believe that would have happened anywhere else except for Philadelphia.
No, I already told you we booed
Right.
Santa, but we didn't trash his wife.
Right. Right. No, I think that the PGA should have known if you're going to have something in New York, you're going to get New York fans there. And these guys supposedly paid $750 per ticket. Well, they weren't getting $750 worth of enjoyment. How can you get $750 worth of enjoyment?
Okay.
Not the beer out of Rory's wife's hand. Yeah, it's a sad commentary on New York and others. But I guarantee you there'll never be another Ryder Cup in New York, and I don't think there'll be one in Philadelphia either, or New
You
Jersey.
you you can keep hurling shade. It's okay. Uh, I'm good with it. So I have a question because you were going to write a book on leadership.
Yeah,
Okay. And you alluded to maybe the book I wrote is a leadership book in some ways, but it's personal leadership. My thing is connection with self is oxygen, because that
right.
is what I believe. So are those people breathing deeply right now? Was that oxygen for them? What I would say to you is there are people, let's just use this as an anecdotal way to close this conversation. So you were going to write a book on leadership, which is awesome. And I'd love to read it and I'd help you write it and whatever, because I believe everybody, well, you already wrote two books, Life's a Joke and Life's a Joke Part Two, but I want you to write this one because as Plato said, there's three things in life every man should do: build a house, have a kid, and write a book.
Yeah, yeah,
So as it relates to this book, if you're going to take what to your point about not everybody knows what a playground is, fair enough, but we all had laboratories in
yeah.
which we grew up and learned connection. I see
Sure.
your wife behind you. I guess that's your wife, whatever. She had a lab. There's somebody in a window behind. I don't know. It doesn't matter.
Oh, yeah, right. How
It
about
doesn't
that?
matter. My wife, the same. My kids, the same. My kid, I coached, but my kids never played. But they had other laboratories for connection, how they figured out how to
Right,
interact with people.
right, right. Yep.
So the playground was a euphemism for me as a way to softly sell the overall, right? But Warren Buffett did a pretty freaking good job, and I don't imagine he had too many 3-pointers in his life, but his laboratory was different.
Yeah, right.
But the point I'm trying to make is leadership, and so um, if you got hired as a consultant to the
Right.
PGA of America, and this is just anecdotal, it didn't mean to
Okay.
bring it up, but since
Yeah,
you did,
right.
right? Um, and they said, Jack, what could we have done better? Not we needed to have it in New York for reasons that I can't tell you, and you'll never under whatever. It's none of your
All
business.
right. Yeah.
But I'm not talking about Jack Fertig, show producer.
Yeah. Right.
I'm talking about Jack Fertig, leadership consultant. What could have been done better from a leadership perspective, whether it's playground principles, Fertig notes, Fertig principles, or
Yeah.
whatever? But you've been in leadership your whole life.
Yeah.
You have.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell me, think about it, because this is, I don't mean to be a trick question, and you didn't know I was going to ask it, but you brought up the Ryder Cup, and I am a 100% pain in the ass. So I'm I'm going to
Yeah.
ask you
Okay.
that question.
Well, all right.
What would
I
be your
think
advice?
first, all right. I think first you have to have some for instances, and you have to tell them, for instance, anecdotally, what if,
Absolutely.
what if the first 2 days the Europeans are absolutely kicking the Americans' ass? What do you expect from the people who are there, who are paying $750 a ticket? Now, what we're going to have to do, if we are not going to have, first of all, you're going to have a safe area for the families of the golfers. Secondly, you're going to probably let them know there will be fines or ejections, because there's a chance that there's always trash talking going on between a fan of the US and a fan of Europe.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So then sometimes trash talking gets elevated, especially if it's not close. Because if it's close, then it's more, hey, it's probably let's cheer for the team and give them what we need. But if it was like it was, what is 11 and a half to 3.5,
Whatever, yeah.
or 11 and a half to 4.5 going into Sunday, it wasn't like, if those people knew it was going to be close, they would have been cheering more and they wouldn't have been as obnoxious. But I think that's what you're going to have to. I think you're going to say, okay, you're not going to tell me why it has to be in New York, but I know what New York is like. And just in case the United States gets blown out, or let's say the United States is blowing out Europe, you're going to have some precautions. And whether it's having more security or fines, for people who misbehave, whatever it might be. And sometimes fines don't matter if you're paying $750 a
Oh,
ticket.
that's true.
What's $1,000 fine? But maybe a $50,000 fine would hurt you. There's something I think you have to do, and I go back to New York. It's just, you and I know New York people, Philly people, I know New Jersey
Yeah, yeah,
people,
yeah, yeah.
and that's what it was going to be. It was inevitable.
Sure. Let me ask a different question then before we hop off, because to me, I felt like the players and frankly the captains could have done a better job with the crowd. I
Yeah.
do.
Well,
I think they could step
I
up
don't,
and be an example, quiet
yeah.
it down.
Well, I
That's my
think,
opinion. But you
yeah.
don't have to share it. I'm just telling you
No,
what.
I don't know. I don't know if European captain, um,
No, I'm talking Keegan Bradley and the United States players.
right, right. And I think, they were, you think Keegan Bradley really wanted to go to the crowd and
No,
say
I
something?
get that, but we're talking leadership now.
Yeah, okay. No, I mean, yeah, sometimes leadership is hard. And, Keegan Bradley, he knew what was going to happen. He knew how his fans were. I mean,
I'm
he's
not dunking
played.
on Keegan. I'm saying it overall because personally, everyone look in the book you read it. Um, um, oh, what's his name? The guy from MIT. I'm drawing a blank. Who wrote the book, The Fifth Discipline? I quoted him in about Peter
Oh,
Senge.
right, right,
Peter
right.
Senge. He says, you got to be a model.
Yeah.
Everyone has to be a model, and that was my takeaway, Jack. I'm not arguing with what you're saying, but I think this is a micro, not necessarily a macro thing, because if we lose personal leadership, then we're going to get dragged away in the jet stream of
Yeah. Okay.
excuses.
I think in answer to your question, I don't think it was Keegan Bradley. I think it was the other people, PGA people, who should have done something
Okay.
to control the crowd. Keegan Bradley had enough on his mind. He
No,
had enough on
I
his
get
plate,
that, but
you know.
what about the
But I mean,
player?
you've been at games where fans are throwing stuff on the floor, basketball games, and the coach goes over to the microphone and says, "Please don't do that. We're classier than that, or what, whatever." And I remember one of the coaches, might have been Billy Tubbs, who went to the crowd and says, "Please stop throwing things on the court, regardless of how bad the referees are." you
Well,
know, listen,
that's exacerbating the problem. But somebody coach like Coach Raveling, if he took the mic, I'm telling
right?
you, they're stopping.
Oh yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
I'm
Right.
telling you, they're stopping. If Tark
Sure.
took the mic, if Dean Smith
Yep.
took the mic,
Yep.
they're stopping. So anyway, that's just my point of view. Whatever. But last thing, Jack, if you could grab a whiteboard and draw up a winning play for humanity at this point.
Uh, well, I don't know.
It's a
I guess
tough one, but
I
you're not
shouldn't
here because of
I,
your good looks.
I shouldn't say that's for sure. I shouldn't say this, I guess, on the air. They
No, it's fine. We'll
may
edit
come
it
and
out.
deport me. But I think what would help the country is if Marjorie Taylor Greene and Alexandria Ocasio Cortez had a fight to the death, and then we executed the winner. So for me, for the country, I think come to the middle. We've done this where the left hates the right and the right hates the left, and it's not working.
You
Okay?
think?
It's not. We are not the United States of America anymore. We're the states of America, but we're not the United States. I
Well,
think you got to come to the middle,
yeah,
because if you don't, it's going to be a well. There's another Stephen Covey, number 4. Think win-win.
think win-win. It's my
Everything we do
religion. That's what I tell people.
and everything we do here is win-lose.
It's true.
Everything is win-lose. That's why the government, if they shut down, that's why, because it's win-lose. And the Democrats blame the Republicans blame them. And the average person, you think they care who's right and who's wrong? If I'm getting fired
Not at
or
this point.
furloughed
Right.
because you're shutting, I don't care who's right and who's wrong.
Right.
I don't have a job anymore.
Yeah.
Come
No,
on. I don't, if you don't do the seek to understand before trying to be understood, think win-win. If you're not of that nature, if you want to win-lose, if Stephen Covey also has, remember the pie,
Oh yeah.
and if I get a slice of it, it's less than what you can get.
Yeah.
And Stephen Covey said, why don't we just make a bigger pie?
Absolutely. Abundance mentality.
Exactly. Right.
No,
Well,
it's one of my. I say the world would be a better place if everybody just lived the 7 habits.
oh,
That's it.
absolutely.
You know, I
I think that should be taught in every school.
me
And I
ditto.
said it before. I think your book should be in every school,
Thank you. That's
because I don't think there's nothing. I don't think there's anything that you can deny. There's no arguing in your book. There's no arguing with anything you say, other than what the hell's a playground.
It is a good.
You
This
know.
I'm going to go out across the street right now with my shovel and my bucket and start to fill it up. Hey, I want to thank you, Jack. Seriously, your perspective. We obviously, in case anyone doesn't realize, Jack and I probably could talk for about 4 hours and then get water. But I appreciate you sharing some of your laboratory with us. It's obviously diverse with lots of test tubes and whatever. And
Yeah.
the thing I'll say, what I wrote about in the book is, I think if each of us really start to, look, seek first to understand, then be understood. Seek first to understand yourself too, really. Like, what do you
Yeah.
really want to happen? Is this what you want? Do you want to show up every day looking over your shoulder? Someone's going to sucker punch you. Do you want to try to make it better? If Jack's open, do I want to throw him the ball? Do I want to share my
Yeah.
sandbox with him? Do I want to let him use my shovel? I don't care what analogy it is. And I
Sure.
don't even think it's Pollyanna because it's not hard. And if you
No. And
really,
if you hate, why do you hate?
why do you hate? And because Dr. Covey would tell us there is an abundance mentality. And if that's
Right.
not true, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
But
Oh, you're right.
in any case, I thank you, Jack, very much. Barry Kleiman, Program Principles Podcast. Write to myself. Also, Jack, you'll send me. I want to recommend Jack's books. So I'll put
No,
it just if you like anecdotes and metaphors and basketball and sports stories, you can tell he's obviously a born entertainer. Coaching should have been his second profession. He should have done stand up. Uh,
I actually have done a little stand up, but
there's no
it's
surprise here.
mainly emceeing uh, banquets and things like that. But in any case, I'll tell you what, Barrett. The second book I wrote in 2018, and it's now 2025. If somebody wants to email me their address, home address, I'll mail them a book.
What a good dude.
I'll sign it. I'll mail him a book. I'm not. I want to. My wife wants him to. I got 200 of them in the garage. She wants me to get rid of them anyway.
Well,
And to
that,
let everybody know, fertigjack at AOL.com, which tells you what a dinosaur I am. It's just FERTIGJACK at AOL.com. You email me your address. I'll send you a copy of the book.
that's we joked last night about being a dinosaur, and AOL proves it. Uh, but it's very generous of you. And I also will say it's a playground principle, right? Share the ball. Good things happen when people share the ball. And here's
Sure.
Jack. He doesn't know anybody, but he's willing to, and no, I don't mean that, who might write to him. And he's
Yep.
willing to
Yeah.
invest his time and so forth. So it's very seriously, it's very gracious and modeling behavior. So I thank you, my friend. And
I'm not sending one to Ben Braun.
no, don't do that. He's got enough money to buy.
He already has one.
Yeah, there you go.
And he
But
tried to schnorr me out of a book anyway. He didn't want to pay you, but you know him. So
I didn't say it, you did.
he's a
Uh,
wonderful guy and a great coach
oh
and a
yeah,
good analyst
yeah,
too.
great. I mean, 600 plus wins. What else do you need to say?
That's right. That's
Seriously, what
right.
else do you need to say? 600 plus wins. I've broken bread with on more occasions than him than maybe anybody but my wife and kids.
Yeah.
Uh, seriously. So
And
and
I know that he's told you about how he beat Mike Krzyzewski, Dean Smith, Rolly Massimino, um, and I think there was another one. Maybe Bob Knight, I think too. Didn't he beat them in the NCAA tournament? He beat Indiana, right?
oh, you mean the eating contest or a game?
Eating contest, he beat everybody but Rick Majerus.
No, like I said, we've had some epic meals together. Uh, but yeah, thank you. I'm greatly appreciative, and one of these days we'll actually fist bump each other in real life,
Absolutely.
and I would love that,
Absolutely.
of course, and maybe even get out and hit some golf balls around.
All right. It's fine with me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do. Stay safe, Jack. Thank you very, very much.
My pleasure, Barry.
You be well, huh?
You too.
Bye bye.